The July 1st, 2025 regular meeting of the Everett Public Schools Board of Directors is hereby called to order. We will begin with the land acknowledgement. Director Herman?
We acknowledge the original inhabitants of this area, the Sahobs people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. In Everett Public Schools, we strive to create equitable outcomes and build a culture of inclusive belonging for all students, teachers, staff, and community.
Thank you. And now for the flag salute. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. If you're wearing a hat, unless you're in uniform, please remove it.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Will the secretary please take the roll?
President Mitchell.
Present.
Vice President Herman.
Present.
Director Revelinsky.
Present.
Director Atkins.
Present.
Director Lawrence.
Present.
Thank you. That takes us to section 5.0, adoption of the agenda. Dr. Saltzman, have there been any changes to the agenda after it was published?
Yes, Madam Chair. Yes, Madam Chair. There were two changes to the agenda. Item 11.02, approval of the personnel report. The report was updated. Item 11.05, approval of memorandum of understanding with Eastern Washington University for the college and the high school program was deleted from the agenda and replaced on the August 19th agenda.
Thank you. Is there any objection to the meeting agenda being adopted by general consent? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted by general consent. That takes us to section 6.0, recognitions when there is none for this meeting. Section 7.0, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Saltzman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and to the public this evening. I'd like to take this time to thank the entire Everett Public School community, which is the entire community, for a fantastic school year. We're truly honored to serve more than 20,000 students every day. So tonight I'm going to share with our public a very special video that will look back on the moments and milestones and memories that made this school year one to remember. I always say this, that the first day of school, every kindergarten child got home, and the last day we have commencement of over 1,200 students. So within that capsule, I'd like to share this video with you to encapsulate the school year. Thank you.
All finished?
That is all I have, and I wish everybody a safe and healthy summer. Thank you.
Thank you for that lovely video and Harmony and everybody that took all those pictures. So, sorry, I have to catch my breath because it was so wonderful. That takes us to section 8.0, board comments. Director Herman, would you like to begin?
Actually, nothing to report out tonight, just wishing everyone a wonderful summer.
Okay, Director Revelinsky?
Only been a week. I don't have anything. Happy 4th.
Dr. Adkins?
Yes, I have a pre-written statement.
That's fine.
Ayukwi, and good afternoon. I do not have much to report, but I do want to take this time to say a few remarks. My conscience demands that I speak about this. As the only person sitting here at the dais who was originally elected by the people and not just appointed, I believe I speak on behalf of the people when I say that it is our community and people's will to do all we can to ensure the separation of church and state, and to ensure that all of our kids feel safe, connected, and welcome in our schools. I also believe strongly that what we are allowing LifeWise to do is wrong and is harming our kids, the very kids I was elected to protect. LifeWise and its mission to bring white supremacy and Christian nationalism to our schools cannot be allowed to have access to our kids. LifeWise is explicitly supported by the Heritage Foundation and its Project 2025 effort to turn our nation into a fascist theocracy. LifeWise and its far-right backers are involved in a battle for the very soul of our nation. And nationally, we're losing this fight. We're losing against authoritarianism, against white supremacy, against Christian nationalism. But until the battle is fully lost, and even after that, I will do all I can to fight against it, because our kids deserve a brighter future. And as someone who attended one of the last remaining boarding schools still ran by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, I am all too familiar with the dark history that religious education has in this country, with its treatment of kids of color, of Native kids, of LGBT kids. I am all too familiar with the attempts in the past and present by the white Christian majority to snuff out the cultures, religion, and language of Native kids and other kids of color. We cannot allow this religious brainwashing and bullying of non-Christian and LGBT kids to take place when we can do something to stop it. We must do everything we possibly can to protect our kids. And I want to remind my fellow board members that standing idly by because our hands are tied when we could do something to try to stop this, that's not leadership, it's complicitness. Thank you.
Director Lawrence?
I have nothing to report. Thank you. Happy summer, everyone.
Yeah. So I would just like to say I returned to work today after having a month off, and now many of you will be taking the necessary time off. I know that work of the district isn't stopping, and I hope that everyone gets the time off they need. Enjoy the summer and happy 4th of July. And I also want to say again how much I am thankful to the district and Dr. Saltzman and for the leadership so that we did not make the news, unfortunately, like Bellevue School District did this week. It is very tragic for them, but I really want to thank the leadership of this district for where we are today, especially as we have our budget planned for next year. So thank you, and thank you. That takes us to public comment. We do have more public comment today about the LifeWise program. For the public's knowledge that might be listening to this, we are looking into this effort. And it is July 1st. There is, this is the end of the school year, but we do welcome the comments that are coming again today. I do have a preamble to read that even though some of you might be the same, this is for the betterment of the community and those listening. The school board sets aside 15 minutes during regular board meetings to hear from our constituents. We do this because we value public input and want to hear and understand the perspectives you bring to the table. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. As board president, I have the responsibility to ensure that our board meetings are conducted. We conduct a district meeting in business in public. We do this in an orderly, productive, and respectful manner. We welcome ideas and opinions presented in that same manner. Thank you for helping me with this responsibility. The entire board welcomes you to this public meeting. It is important that you understand how this portion of the board meeting is conducted. We will call you up to the podium to speak in the order in which you are assigned. All comments are recorded, so the board will have access to everything said tonight. Repetition is not necessary, and it may cut into the time of others have to speak. The public comment part of the agenda is for a board to listen to what you have to say. It is not for debate or discussion. Board members do not respond to individual comments. Please remember that your words have impact on you and not the school district. And not the school district are responsible for, I said that badly. Remember, your words have impact, and you, not the school district, are responsible for your words. We caution all speakers that it is possible for your statements could violate the rights of others under various laws, including laws protecting privacy and laws prohibiting defamation. If you are unsure of the legal effects of your remarks, you should seek independent legal advice. In any case, we ask that you help us model a respectful and inclusive community for our students. So I will call you up one at a time, again, 15 minutes, and we have 5 people signed up, so that timing should be just fine for us. And I'll give instructions when the first person comes up, and I'll just remind you as you each come up. So first is Terry Ambergy, who is a resident of the district, to talk about the separation of church and state, and I apologize if I said your last name wrong.
Ambergy.
Ambergy, thank you. And so while you're up there, you'll see a green light that will come on. That'll give you 3 minutes.
Where am I seeing the green light?
It'll be those little bubbles right at the top on your right. Then you'll have 30 seconds, and then a red light will come on. Your time is up, and I'll politely excuse you. So as soon as the green light comes on, you can begin.
Thank you. I was excited when I became a parent almost 42 years ago. I was excited that I could pass on the values and principles of my parents: kindness, generosity, forgiveness, acceptance of all people, regardless of who they are, where they came from, or what they believed in, hard work, love, lots of love. Continuing with these principles, I was taught not to be afraid of eternal punishment, that a part of becoming a better person comes from learning from my mistakes. I've always believed that the foundation of all religions came from a place of love. Yet as I learned about the various religions, it became clear to me that some religions deviate from these basic principles by adding their own rules and conditions. For example, LifeWise Academy would have you believe that they teach just the basic principles, yet further teachings only apply to those who follow their specific ideology. In recent interview, the spokesperson from LifeWise was asked how they would respond to a student asking them what they believed about people who were LGBTQ. The spokesperson stated that they would refer that student to parents to answer that question. That's a cop-out, because LifeWise will gradually teach them that they do not follow their LifeWise interpretation of the biblical teachings, and that those people will go to hell forever. LifeWise acceptance is conditional. You're either one of us or you're one of them, period. Other areas of concern I have, LifeWise, very carefully, will provide conversion therapy to any student they believe may be showing signs of not conforming to their teachings, such as LGBTQ. Legal action taken against the Everett Public School for knowingly violating the separation of church and state through your endorsement of LifeWise Academy. The physical, psychological, and emotional safety of the children cannot be guaranteed by the Everett Public School District. My teachable moments will continue to be of inclusion, not exclusion, acceptance, not rejection, confidence, not fear, unconditional love, lots of love, without the fear of eternal punishment. Thank you for letting me have my comments, and thank you, Charles Atkins.
Thank you. Next, we have Lawrence. Thank you. Thank you. Balloon? How do you say? Balo.
O-U-G-H word.
Oh, thank you.
Is what we kind of come to accept, but I will answer to anything other than late for dinner.
Okay, thank you. So as soon as the green light comes on, you may begin.
All right, I kind of came to this from hearing from others. And the first question I had really came down to, well, is it really a big deal? We're just talking about lunchtime and recess. I mean, what value are those really? And I decided at that point it was time to educate myself a little bit. I've borrowed the following from the American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement: the crucial role of recess in school, April 2023. I believe this applies to the loosely structured interactions that occur at lunchtime as well. I think that basically we're talking about a time that is less structured and more open to the students being able to interact on their own. Recess promotes social and emotional learning, the development of children by offering them a time to engage in peer interaction in which they practice role play and essential social skills. Their conclusion was as following: the lifelong skills acquired for communication, negotiation, cooperation, sharing, problem solving, and coping are not only foundations for healthy development, but also fundamental measures of the school experience. I do not think that those skills should be sacrificed quickly or easily or willingly. I believe that there is too much important learning that goes on during during recess and lunchtime to interrupt it. Thank you.
Thank you. To give you a complete introduction, you did want to speak about recess and lunch, which you did, and you are a resident of the district. So that brings us to Tim of Firetag. Please correct me when you come up. Process of updating the school policies, and you are a resident of the district.
Hi, I'm Tim Firetag. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a resident as well as a pastor of a congregation in North Everett. For months now, this board has heard speaker after speaker sharing our concerns about a lack of a district-wide policy on RTRI programs. You've heard how this lack of policy has allowed a specific program to occur at Emerson Elementary. You've heard how this program violates several of this district's core values, particularly how this program diminishes the diversity of the families who feel safe at this school, the equity of which students are given special status, and jeopardizes the integrity for students, staff, and visitors to be fully themselves. However, today I lift up your core value of collaboration. Where is the evidence that the board has heard these concerns? Where are you reaching out to collaborate with those of us committed to this district, and especially to the student outcome of strengthening student wellness, engagement, and safety? I thank you, Board Member Atkins, for your comments today, and President Mitchell for an acknowledgement that there is work underway, but I would like to see the evidence of collaboration on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to our fourth person titled wants to speak about gratitude and is a resident of the district. Jennifer Phillips McClellan. Wait for the green light.
Good afternoon. I wanted to lead with gratitude today. My child, when we moved to Everett 4 years ago, was excited to go to school, but I was ecstatic for him to go to school. When I found out that Emerson Elementary, which is a few blocks from where I live, offers a dual language program, I stayed up till midnight to make sure my child was signed up. I wanted him to become biliterate. I want him to have an exposure to people who are different from him, to understand different cultures. I'm also a Jew. I work for one of the largest synagogues in the Pacific Northwest. I'm a member there. I'm raising my child Jewish. My child goes to Sunday religion school. When the parents from all sorts of districts from Bellevue and Issaquah, Sammamish, here in Everett, as far south as even Tahoma, come with their kids to religion school. We sit around and have coffee, and sometimes we complain about the school districts that our kids are enrolled in. I am the only parent in that group who has ever had something positive to say about how the school district handles diversity. I am overwhelmed with gratitude that I live here. The diversity posts that we see on the Facebook pages that talk about inclusion for Pride Month, for Jewish American Heritage Month, for Pacific Asian Heritage Month, for Indigenous American Heritage Month. I know the research that must go into those posts because I see the one that belongs to my minority group. At Hanukkah, a parent from Bellevue said that the post said, according to popular Jewish myth, the holiday of Hanukkah, et cetera, but in this district, when you talk about Hanukkah and the miracle and the light, it comes from a reputable source. Someone behind that screen is doing the research. And I am so grateful that our school district cares enough about the inclusion and diversity of our beautiful student body. But my gratitude is coming at a huge cost and condition. You have allowed LifeWise in my district. They do not like me because I am Jewish. They do not like my child because he is Jewish. They will teach him that he is not a good person. And that is wrong. Thank you.
Our last speaker tonight is again about LifeWise, a resident of the district, Kate Malahan. And just wait for the green light to come up.
I want to start off saying, Mr. Atkins, thank you so much for your letter or your statement. It really summed up perfectly the core issues of this issue. As a parent and a long-term resident, I grew up in Everett. My family's been here for 70 years, and we cherish the diversity and inclusion that Everett brings. And so I come mainly as a parent because of the bullying that happens in our schools. We've experienced in my own family, and I've talked to many parents in the Everett School District who have experienced it with their own family. And so my big concern with LifeWise, I have, people can believe the way people believe. Everybody has a right to their own beliefs. But in our schools, we cannot highlight one belief over another. We cannot give special treatment to one religious group over another. What will happen is that our kids already face so many issues of bullying for various reasons in their lives, and this will add one more reason for them to be bullied, either for being part of that group or for not being part of that group. And why would the school district open themselves up to allowing our children to have one more reason to be bullied? And believe me, in this school district, bullying is a very serious issue that I could speak on at another time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And then we do have two written comments. Thank you to Rod Ambergy, as well as to Skylar Milan. I know I'm saying that wrong. And if anyone did request written comments, they will be coming in the coming weeks just because of leave. Thank you so much for coming again today, because some of you have been here before. Please know that, again, we are looking into this and we do hear you, as well as others too. And so thank you so much. And I hope you and your families do enjoy a summer where you can play outside in this beautiful weather. And thank you so much. Next is legislative updates, and I just presume there is none for this meeting. And then that takes us to the consent agenda. Dr. Saltzman, have you received any questions about the consent agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the case of this consent agenda, the Superintendent's Office received no questions regarding items on the consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. First, does any director wish to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in the new business section of the agenda? Seeing none, now, is there any objection to the adoption of the consent agenda by general consent? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved by general consent. That takes us to section 12.0, strategic progress monitoring. There is none for this meeting. That takes us to section 13.0, information and discussion. There is none for this meeting. That takes us to section 14.0, unfinished business. There is none for this meeting. I was told by somebody last week that I run a very efficient meeting, but sometimes it just works out this way. Next takes us to section 5.0, new business. Adoption of the operating budget for fiscal year 25-26, first reading, Ms. Tress.
Apologies. As many times I've done this, I am having technical difficulties today. All right, I got there. Thank you, Dr. Saltzman, Board of Directors, President Mitchell. Tonight, we will review the first reading of the district's operating budget for the 25-26 fiscal year. I will go over the district's budget development timeline, its adoption process, key focuses for next year, assumptions, four-year forecast, and the first reading of the district's general fund and 4 other comprehensive funds for the 25-26 fiscal year budgets. As we review the budget development timeline, I want to highlight that we're always in a phase of a budgeting process. And part of that phase is reviewing the district's overall enrollment. The district's enrollment is a significant assumption. It drives not only revenue, but it also drives how we staff within the district. We review enrollment projections provided by an outside consultant, Les Kendrick, internally to allow us to develop the district's staffing allocations within our schools. Along with this, we begin building the department budget plans. Throughout the year, we engage the board, the district's fiscal advisory council, staff, and departments as we build our budget aligning with the strategic plan. We monitor the legislative session to assess any resources or additional resources that will be available within the budget. And then we begin the overall budgeting process to submit a document to the state. I want to highlight some of the key dates for this year. The board met on April 1st, which was a part of a budget workshop session. The board at a regular board meeting on May 13th was able to hear our 4 high schools present their ASB budgets, as well as tonight is the first reading of the operating budget for the district. Within that, we'll send all of this information to our educational service district within ESD 189 to review and eventually post for the public for a review as well. When we talk about the adoption process, it's a very prescriptive process from the state. Districts are required to make their budgets available to the public by July 10th. And again, we are required to hold a hearing and an adoption, and then our budget should be adopted by August 31st. 35th, that'd be a long month, excuse me. And within that, we prepare, again, as I mentioned, a document that is provided to our educational service district for review as well as the state, There's some key dates highlighted within that adoption schedule. We will provide a public notice of hearing and adoption within multiple times before we hold that budget hearing and adoption on August 19th to then be filed on the day after. As we go through the budget development process, I want to talk about some of our key focuses for the 25-26 fiscal year. Fiscal stability continues to be a key focus. As many of you are aware, and for our public, a few years ago, 2 years ago, we went through a reduction process of reducing $22 to $23 million. And so we continue to look at this and ensure that we are meeting the board's policy, which is a minimum fund balance of 5% overall. We also focused on enrollment growth, specifically in our special education programs and overall increased enrollment and allowing for staffing allocation increases. We incorporated legislative outcomes, which, as I've mentioned in prior presentations, offsets future reductions that we were anticipating. And we were able to increase some material supplies and operating costs above what we typically would because of some additional state funding. I also want to highlight our capital projects funds. We continue to have a large number of projects that are going to be managed simultaneously through next year's fiscal budget. And then our transportation vehicle fund, which has the opportunity to purchase 3 electric buses that will be partially funded through a state grant. As we look to major assumptions through for the next year's budget, I'll begin by talking again about enrollment. The board receives a presentation around our enrollment that we receive from our consultant, and he provides us a low, medium, and high from projections. When we talk about it from a funding perspective, we take the medium enrollment as a conservative process. Again, it drives not only funding from the state, but it also drives staffing allocations. We anticipate some increases in our special education and our multi-language learners, or our TBIP, Transitional Bilingual Instructional Program, and that will drive some of our other state funding resources. I also want to highlight our federal funding assumptions, and right now we are assuming no growth in federal funding. We are aware that there may be some declines in next year's, and we're building out a plan within that if some of that federal funding goes away. Some of the 2025 legislative outcomes have been incorporated, which allowed us to increase our overall local funding as we have the ability to now collect all of our all of our levy capacity for the 2026 calendar year, as well as the state provided additional funding and increased allocations above our maintenance level in special education, as well as material supplies and operating cost allocations. Another a thing we're monitoring right now as well is our state pass-through grants, and we do anticipate no growth, and we may see a decline in state pass-through grants as we kind of go throughout the year and receive those awards. When we look at expenditure assumptions, I want to highlight that the state set the IPD, or the implicit price deflator, what we would typically call a cost of living adjustment, at 2.5%, and that drives our staffing increases. I also want to note we did increase some allocations based on enrollment growth. From a budget to budget perspective, in our basic education programs, it generated about just over three FTE, or full-time equivalent, in staff in our basic education programs. And we're seeing a pretty big jump in our special education from a budget to budget perspective, but that enrollment growth has been throughout the year, and so we've been increasing staff appropriately to serve the students based on where the students are coming in need in those programs. We are seeing cost increases across all of our material supplies and operating costs, as highlighted in this slide. I do want to note that we did see a slight decrease in our retirement costs, and I'll talk about that more throughout the presentation. One thing, as well as I mentioned, we did see increased allocations above our maintenance for our material supplies and operating cost of maintenance level of funding. That really covered only our increase in our utilities and insurance, so just as a frame of reference. What that means from a fiscal outlook perspective, I just want to highlight what we adopted as a budget for this fiscal year, what we were projecting in December, and what's really different from that December projection. This does incorporate 2025 state legislative outcomes. It assumes that medium enrollment projection I discussed earlier. And then it also assumes that we'll increase levy capacity to what we're allowable to collect, but not only ask our voters to approve in a future levy. I want to highlight, it's a very similar pattern trend. And so this is a trend of our fund balance as a percentage of our total expenditures. But what I want to note here is the biggest difference is that we don't anticipate having to make reductions, as I communicated in previous presentations, for that 26-27 fiscal year. Although our expenditures are still exceeding revenues as we see this kind of spend down, it actually levels out in the future years and starts to maintain stability because of that levy capacity increase. So now I'm going to dive into the more detailed portion of all of that information I kind of did a high-level overview, and begin again with enrollment. Now this represents two different perspectives of enrollment. The top graph is our head count as of October 1st, which really is what we typically talk to and what you typically see. And then that bottom graph is how that translates into what the state, how that is an annual average FTE, which drives our funding allocation and how we staff across the district. I'll talk primarily to our head count because that's kind of the easier one to reflect on, and the actual information that is we know what the actual is. When we look at a budget to budget perspective for this year's budget and moving into next year's budget, it's a 166 student increase. However, our enrollment came in higher than our budget, and so it's about a 91 student increase for next year. So when we look at this from a big picture, top level perspective for the general fund, the district's main operating fund, we do anticipate total revenues to increase, driven by many factors, as I'll talk about in the next few slides, and then as well as our expenditures to increase. Again, our expenditures are still exceeding our revenues of about 1% of our total expenditures, so we'll see a slight spend down of our fund balance for the 25-26 fiscal year. When we see this broken down on where we get our money and how we receive funding for the state, this is broken down in kind of a few major buckets here. I'll talk to the top one, and one of the bigger increases is our local taxes. And I mentioned as I mentioned in previous slides, that we are able to collect all of our levy capacity for the 2026 calendar year, which drives that larger increase than we originally anticipated in December of $4.3 million. We're also seeing an increase in our state general purpose funding, and that's driven by multiple factors, but one of the major ones is our enrollment projections, as well as that cost of living factor, or IPD, APD. When we look at our state special purpose funding, that is increasing actually multiple factors here, one of which is our special education enrollment, as well as the increased allocation from the state in special education. We're also seeing an increase in our enrollment related to our transitional bilingual instructional program, or students being served who are multilingual students, as well as we received additional state funding in our learning assistant programs, as 2 more schools qualified for the high poverty portion of that learning assistant programs. The other programs are relatively flat or the same, slightly down as well. And as I mentioned, federal is something we are monitoring, and there's some still unknowns of what the awards will be. I do want to highlight that we believe Title I is relatively going to remain flat, which is one of our larger federal funding, as well as our IDEA federal funding. We believe will remain relatively flat, and we're hopeful we still have around our food and nutrition programs that'll be flat as well, or at least maintain what our current services are. But we're still monitoring that, and we don't have any information at this point in mind to change that assumption. Now, it's when we talk about the breakdown of where we get our resources as a percentage of our entire revenues, it shifts a little bit from last year, but not significantly. So our state funding dollars, which includes both our special programs, our state special programs and our general purpose programs, slightly increased actually from last year, from 76% last year. Our federal dollars have slightly declined based on anticipated awards and other programs remaining flat. And then our local funding increased from last year slightly as well, based on the fact that we have the ability to collect more from our local, collect all of our voter-approved levy. As we move to budgeted expenditures, I want to highlight the programs of which we plan to spend our funding on. Our basic education program is increasing from last year's budget, driven by multiple factors. One would be a shift in allowable expenditures in our CTE programs to our basic education program, as well as an increase in staffing allocations and an increase in overall cost of living adjustments from our CBAs as well as the IPD. Similarly, with our special education program, we're seeing an increase in enrollment, as an increased and staffing allocation costs, and an increase in service costs. Our federal program slightly declining, aligning with what our resources are budgeting to be planned at this moment in time. And then our career and technology education programs, as I mentioned before, allowable costs have been shifted from our CTE programs to our basic education program, but there's no change into actual services and classes and courses to be provided. And then our categorical programs, which includes federal programs as well as state categorical programs, is increasing, driven, again, as I mentioned before, by some of those revenue increases in enrollment related to our multilingual students, as well as our learning assistant programs. When we look at this as a percentage, or our total expenditures as a percentage of our entire budget, again, we're seeing minor shifts, but not significant changes. We're seeing a slight decline in our basic education and CTE programs, and that's really driven by the fact that we're seeing an increase in our special education programs from the prior year, really driven by enrollment increases and overall service cost increases. And everything else is relatively about the same from the prior year. Now, when we look at our expenditures breakdown by how we spend or what we spend our money on, we call it our object code, but this is broken down by staffing costs and then material supplies and operating costs. We're seeing an increase in our salary costs, driven not only by increase in allocations, as I mentioned before, but also a cost of living adjustment. But we are seeing our payroll and benefits remaining flat, and that's really driven by the fact that our medical costs increased, but that was offset by our retirement costs. We're seeing a shift in materials and supplies. This actually, for the 25-26 budget, it reflects more of what we actually spent this year based on some increases for next year. And so we're seeing that shift in actual purchase service cost of what we spent for this fiscal year. And those, I want to highlight, our purchase services also include our transportation service agreement, our insurance, our utilities, some of our bigger material supplies and operating costs, and that's where a lot of those increases are going. And then everything else is relatively flat or slightly declining based on the plans of our departments or other school plans, budgeted plans. Now, breaking that out and comparing that as a percentage of our total expenditure and our plan for our budget, there really hasn't been, again, significant changes from last year. We're seeing a slight decline in our total salary and benefit cost for this year from 84% to 83.4%, really actually driven by the fact that our employee benefits and payroll taxes didn't increase at the same rate as our staffing costs, the actual salaries did. And so it kind of shifted that pattern for this year's budget. Now moving on to the district's 4 other comprehensive funds, I'll begin by discussing the Capital Projects Fund. The Capital Projects Fund's resources are primarily from the 2022 capital levy, and this fund supports major construction projects and technology initiatives. Again, we are seeing our revenue increase based on the voter-approved levy, and then our expenditures is really aligned with our project plan for the next fiscal year. And we have some major projects, and I'll talk to the details on that on the next slide, that we are moving forward with based on that 2022 voter-approved levy. And as we have a majority part of our capital construction plan is through the levy, we've had to build up our fund balance to do some of the major replacement projects that we had on that 2022 capital levy. And so we have started the work for Jackson Elementary this year, and we are continuing that work into next year, and we'll see a significant amount of progress there. And then also within that, we're looking at Madison Elementary School replacement. There's also some mechanical upgrades related to the Clean Buildings Act at multiple schools next year, and then Everett High School's auditorium is being modernized. We have our technology initiatives, including device lifecycle management, one-to-one initiatives, and subscriptions and licenses planned for the next year. And then some other projects related to other site work and purchases of properties, other finishes, portable classrooms, and electrical and mechanical projects as well. When we look at the district's debt service fund, this fund supports outstanding principal and interest. The district has approximately just less than 70 million in outstanding bonds, and for the 25-26 fiscal year, we'll have about just under 67 million in outstanding bonds. The fund balance is sufficient to support future year principal and interest payment, and the total expenditures also support the interest and principal related to the bond payments for the next year. The associated student body funds and support activities and athletics of the district. I want to highlight that, as I mentioned before, that the high schools had the opportunity to present to the board on May 13th, and there have been no changes to the overall ASB budget since that presentation. They are budgeting to maintain kind of that fund balance of just under $900,000 for the next year. When we look at the Transportation Vehicle Fund, which supports vehicles that transport our students to and from school that the district owns, we do anticipate purchasing 3 electric vehicles supported through a state grant as well as our state depreciation funding, and that our total expenditures have enough capacity to purchase those buses for the next year. All of our other, as I mentioned before, transportation funding is supported through the general fund as well. Thank you.
So much, and I do appreciate the beginning with that high-level overview. So are there any comments or questions? Yes, Director Lawrence.
Do you mind just explaining one more time about CTE? I understand, is that going to be funded in full? It's just moved to a different place?
Yes.
Or if you could explain that.
So as we got clarification from the state on what we are allowed to claim as CTE-related courses, we had to shift those courses that some of those courses that we were claiming to our basic education program. But we are providing those same courses and then having the same opportunity at this point in time, and so no changes. It does generate a little bit of a loss of revenue because we get some enhanced funding for CTE programs, but that's reflected in our revenue projections, and it's about a difference of just under $300,000 on the revenue side.
Thank you very much.
Director Atkins.
Yeah, back on the enrollment page, when you disaggregate it out by annual average FTE. So with the Running Start / other, I presume the other is the ORCA program. Is there?
It's Running Start. It's our re-engagement program. I'm not sure what the ORCA program is, but we call it a re-engagement program. It's and our alternative learning as well.
And then I guess a follow-up question to that. I presume that the difference between the head count, the October 1st head count, the actual head count of the high schoolers of the 5,400 versus the annual average FTE of the high school and Running Start, there's like a 200 student difference. Is that just?
It's kind of driven by, we get enhanced on the Running Start. We can claim more than a 1.0 in our Running Start enrollment. And so that's where that kind of different. So we count some in high school and depending on where they landed, some in our Running Start program as well. And then I do, just as we're talking to this, I didn't mention before, but our elementary decline is really driven by kindergarten. We anticipate a lower kindergarten than what we received last year as well.
Answers my questions. Thank you.
It was those non-COVID babies. No? Any other questions or comments, Director?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Stress. Just today even, and what came out yesterday regarding federal funding. And we had discussed previously in our budget workshop, we were anticipating potentially Title II. The other big ones look like Title IV, that they're potentially withholding.
Yeah,
And
so-
could you talk a little bit?
Yeah, so it's Title III, Title II, and Title IV. And it's about $2 million in total of what we receive. We have some resources in Title III that we can use in our multilingual services, and then we're looking at what we can or cannot do with the other resources as well, and to kind of see what a plan would be. But at this moment in time, we're still kind of waiting to see what that lands at. Anything that's staffing, like teacher-related, we can't really change until the next year, but we have some options on what we can and cannot do in other places, as we'll look at once we know what the final awards are.
And timing-wise, because we will be adopting this next month, still potential there.
Yeah, if there's anything, we might consider making changes, but we can always adjust later, kind of depending on what it is. We may not know all of the awards, even the state, some of them until October of next year.
Any other question? Yes.
Thank you. I have a question it's on the capital projects budget slide,
Yeah.
and it's those subscriptions and licenses, are those SPEDAs?
Some, yes. Some depends, yes and no. Some are new things that we might be doing or staffing related to implementation of certain programs, and some of them, yes, could be SPEDAs, but may or may not be long-term. They may be short-term, like an annual one-year contract.
And for the community, what's a SPEDA?
So it's a
For non-accountants?
subscription-based IT arrangement. That's ultimately a license agreement,
Like
like a
Windows
software
like-
program.
okay.
Yeah, thank you for that follow-up.
Not an accountant.
I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks. I would just like to make a quick comment. You know, there was an article in the Seattle Times about the Bellevue School District and their kind of financial struggles. I would point to the very first reason that they cite in that article is inaccurate budget assumptions. You probably heard me talk about that too. I commend the superintendent and Ms. Tress not only for the exceptional level of transparency shown in the presentation, especially around the assumptions on revenue and expenditures, but also the monthly financial reports that we get, that I tend to pore over also. I also had an opportunity to sit down and chit chat with Ms. Tress last week about the underlying assumptions a little bit. I believe that they are, that they and the methodology with which they've been developed are reasonable. And finally, the revenue and expenditure gross up or capacity permits the superintendent to manage the district finances to an appropriate degree without deviating from approved appropriations. So in conclusion, excellent work historically and on this budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just got a New York Times notification that the Trump administration has nearly $7 billion for schools with little exception removed. So it's really going to hurt us as they do not treat the least of ours and at least of us. So it was a really sad thing, but I shouldn't have said that before. I thanked you for those kind words. And I just have to say too, for that capital fund, I think it was the day after the last day of school that trucks drove up in front of Penny Creek Elementary School. So obviously the summer construction is at work as I drive past every day. So, but I think, you know, as we see different things, you know, the state can't fill in, especially what I've heard about SNAP. I mean, our food services, what our community benefits are for those kids in need so they can get their meals. I mean, anywhere we can get it. I know everybody works so hard in this district to serve the needs of our students. So thank you. So that actually takes us to an action of, is there any objection to adopting this item by general consent for first reading? And I appreciate you putting out the hearing schedule. Nobody ever shows up, but just in case, we have to advertise. So this is then sent for second reading in August. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I don't normally look at my phone, but when everything flashes about schools and money, we're talking about budget. Next takes us to section 15.02, policy 6114, gifts and proposed revision, first reading. Mr. Fleckenstein.
Well, thank you and good evening. Tonight we have proposed revisions to policy 6114. This increases the capital asset threshold from $5,000 to $10,000. This increase changes the requirement for board approval of donations to greater than $10,000. These particular revisions align to our federal capital asset limits and procedure 6801P, which is precipitated by changes in federal law. The proposed revisions to policy 6114 gifts has been reviewed by superintendent's senior staff prior to tonight's meeting.
Thank you so much, because I've always wondered why I have to approve somebody giving us $5,000. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Director Atkins.
Yeah, when was the amount of 5,000 decided? And I see that the policy was first made in like 1981. In the initial policy, was there a different amount?
I would have to go back. That was before my time, so I don't know the answer to your question offhand, but I can research it.
Okay, I was just wondering if we had already changed the amount before.
It just seems like it might have been lower just because of cost of living, but that's where it's even bringing it up to $10,000 might even seem like, if somebody wants to give us, especially some of the generous families and the PTAs and everything, we're going to say no? So Director, yeah, please.
I think it was February of 2018, if I'm accurate, when it was updated.
Because that would have been, you would have known that too, because it probably was a federal.
Yeah, it was, saw it here.
Yeah. So, thank you. And then, so any other discussion?
I
Yes,
guess
please.
another comment. So I'm guessing part of why we're wanting to change this is so that way if we don't, I've seen some of the pieces of technology that we've had, like that surgery table thing. I presume that costs more than the $5,000. So like that, or like computers, or, sorry, I'm just.
Yeah, this is just
So
the gifts.
this specific policy is around gifts to the district. So typically, gifts to the district are run through the superintendent or their designee and go to consent agenda and are typically adopted on consent agenda. What this is doing is it's increasing the limit of that gift that does not require the board's approval. So for example, typically you will see gifts that are given to schools that in the past exceeded $5,000. Those would be routed to a regional superintendent for their signature and then would be made and provided on consent agenda for the board to just adopt on one motion. There's a lot of those, I think to your point, President Mitchell. And so what this does is, from the board's perspective, we can take care of those at the administrative level and approve those up to a $10,000 amount. These particular revisions also, for principals or program directors' approval, is still under $5,000. So when they are school-based, and most of our gifts are school-based, they will come still through the regional superintendent's office. If under 10,000, you will not see them. Net effect. This also, as I had earlier mentioned, aligns these changes in our gifts policy to the capital asset limits that exist in a procedure within the district, which is 6801P. And that's just aligning to, and working with the finance team, recent changes that they've received and will be making within the business manual. So it's just making sure everything aligns from a finance perspective and total amounts, but just to kind of create that congruence.
Sorry to ask further questions, but just so I'm understanding. So like right now, if we don't change this policy, if I donated went out and bought like a $6,000 iMac special graphic design thing and gifted it to the Everett High like art class or whatever, that would need board approval.
Correct.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
Yeah, because that's what it is always, it's like the Rick Steves grant for Emerson. It was like $5,000. It's like, thank you, Mr. Steves. So, thank you. So, okay, so the action required is there any other discussion?
Well, I would just say that I actually do like reading about those donations in the consent agenda a great deal, but I get that it can be a bit of an administrative burden, and it can slow things down to go to the board. So as much as I love to see it, I also love to see things getting done faster, you know?
Yeah, I think Dr. Atkins.
Yeah, maybe we could just ask that anytime there's a gift that we see it in like the superintendent's report or the Friday report or something.
Especially a significant gift. I mean, it's like if it is in those thousands and it's meaningful, maybe a Friday report if it's reasonable.
I think it's silly for us to approve these gifts, but I do think it's not silly for us to recognize and express gratitude for them.
Well, and honestly too, to be reminded of the generosity of our community. So if it's not too much, it is, I mean, it is, it's again, it's nice to see. So thank you. But we don't have to approve them. So is there any objection to adoption of this item by general consent for first reading? Seeing none, this will be sent to second reading. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that takes us to section 16.0, upcoming agenda items. Dr. Saltzman, what do we have planned?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, the public, and the Board of Directors this evening. And as we're in July 1, we get to plan August. So at the August 14th special meeting, directors will attend summer commencement. Something to look forward to. At our regular August 19th meeting of 2025, the board agenda will contain the following. Policy 6114 gifts revised second reading. A recognition to introduce our new administrators to the team. A recognition for Teacher of the Year. Minimum basic education. The 2025-2026 budget hearing. Madison Elementary School's education specifications. Thank you to the public. Everett High School education specifications. Thank you to our public. June and July financial reports. Imagine Learning contract. Everett Public Schools Foundation and PTSA limited user permits. Graduation Alliance sole source and contract. College and the high school agreement with Everett Community College, Edmonds, and the University of Washington. School resource officer contracts, and the Washington School Improvement Framework School Improvement Goals. At the August 21st special meeting, directors will attend the board annual workshop with the superintendent. Thank you, Madam Chair, and the public this evening.
Thank you. This concludes the July 1st, 2025 regular meeting of the Everett Public Schools Board of Directors, and we will see you again in August. This meeting is now adjourned.